Okay. Okay, so we can begin with first three bows to the Buddha. One, two, three, and then the salutation. Na- Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Blessed One, the Worthy One, the fully enlightened one. Okay, so good morning, everybody. And today we're already in October. Wow, October 4th. And I'm going to share the screen now. Okay, is the screen visible?
Yes, Bhante, we can see it.
Okay. Okay, so we're continuing now with our reading of the Anguttara Nikaya, the numerical discourses, Book of Sevens. And now we come to Sutta number 57, which features the protagonist or the interrogator is a man named Siha. The word Siha means lion, and he is described as a general, Senapati, which is interesting that, the Buddha, though he's the Santi Nayaka, the leader in peace, but his disciples also include military men, in this case, a general.
Bhante, there is a note box on the screen. Did you put it, or it's the yellow one highlighting?
Yeah, I put that in. I put that
Okay,
in. Yeah.
okay.
Okay, so now this general named Siha comes to the Buddha and he opens the topic of the sutta is going to be a directly visible fruit of giving. Or in other words, what is the benefit of giving, the benefit that comes to the donor, to the giver? And the Buddha doesn't give a direct answer, but the Buddha is going to, maybe we call this the Socratic method, a little bit like the method of Socrates, drawing out the answer by questioning the person who asked the question to get that person to give the answer himself. And so the Buddha is going to ask him about the benefits or fruits of giving. And first, when it's speaking about giving here in English, we usually think of giving as an act of charity that extends from a person in a privileged position to a person who is sort of poor, indigent, needy, disadvantaged, and so forth. But this is a giving in the particular religious context or spiritual context of ancient India and even continuing up to contemporary traditions in Buddhist countries where one has a, let's say, a dichotomy or division in the in the society or in the religious community between the renunciants, those who give up the household life, the worldly life, and give up providing for themselves, who sort of go forth out of faith, throwing themselves upon the kindness, compassion, and generosity of others, going forth into this homeless life of renunciation in the trust, the confidence that they will serve as a model an inspiring model for others that will inspire the people in the household life to provide them with the material means of subsistence, with their food, robes, dwelling place, medicines, and other requisites. And things like a robe you get it'll last 4 or 5 years. A dwelling place can last centuries. Medicines you need in times of sickness. But the thing that you need every day is food. And so the primary way in which this act of giving is conducted is that the renunciants, the monastics, will go on their alms round, leaving the monasteries and temples, carrying their alms bowl, and walk silently from house to house, holding out the alms bowl, not begging. You don't ask for anything, but you just stand in front of the house, and then the layperson in the house will come out with, if they have saddha or faith and bhakti, devotion, they'll come out with some provisions of food and place them into the bowl of the renunciants. And so interestingly, that alms bowl, just a simple plain bowl, becomes the, let us say, the symbol of the solidarity between these two divisions or two branches of the Buddhist community. The lay people who provide the food and the monastics who, in their alms bowl, collect the food. And we usually think, sort of in the Western way of thinking, that it is the donor who, out of generosity, provides the benefit to the recipient, which in a way it's true because the donor gives the food that the recipient needs to subsist. Without food, you can't go on living. And so, of course, when you receive the food that's offered by the householders, then you're getting a benefit from the householders. But from another point of view, this is from a more spiritual point of view, we could say that it is the monastics or the renunciants on their alms round who hold out the alms bowl, who are conferring the benefit upon the lay people who provide the food. And we're going to see some of these benefits will be enumerated here in this sutta. So let us see what these benefits might be. And so the Buddha is going to draw out the answers by questioning Siha. So he starts off by drawing a distinction between two types of people. So there's one without faith who is miserly, mean, and abusive. And that's contrasted with another person who possesses faith, who is a generous giver, and who delights in charity. Yeah, just for my own reference, I just put in the Pali terms. I don't know if it's too small. Let's see if we can increase. Okay, I think this is better. So we have the first person is asaddo, that's without saddha, and machari, that's the person with macharya. Macharya is miserliness. Kadario is what it's translated here, mean, stingy. And paribhasati means to abuse, to revile, to insult. So a person who's without faith, miserly, stingy, and insolent, insulting others, that's the bad type of person. Then we have in contrast, the good person is saddo, one who has saddha, dana pati, Pati means a lord or master. So this is a lord of giving. And anupada here is generosity, and rato is delighting in. So one who delights in generosity. So we have the contrast of those two types of people. And so then the Buddha asked the question, to whom would the arahants first show compassion? To the one who is without faith, miserly, mean, and abusive, or to the one who has faith, who's generous and delights in charity? And it seems to me that even though the text here uses the word arahats, but we don't have to think of this as being the arhats in the technical sense of those who have reached the fourth and final fruit of the holy life. But we could just say maybe arahats is being used here in a generic sense to represent, we could say, virtuous renunciants, virtuous monastics who are going on their alms round. And so to whom would they show compassion? And they show compassion by going to the house of the person in order to collect the food. Because it's when they go to the house to collect the food, they give the layperson the opportunity to practice dana. And to practice dana is a way of creating merit or wholesome karma. So that is the expression of compassion. And so we could say, on one hand, it's the layperson who shows compassion to the renunciant by giving them the food they need to sustain their life. But the monastic or renunciant also shows compassion to the layperson by walking silently with the alms bowl, standing silently in front of the house, holding out that alms bowl, and giving the people the opportunity to practice dana. And that forms a bond of solidarity between the lay community and the monastics. And it gives rise to a sense of, it's always a double experience of joy. Yeah, this was one of the happiest experiences in my own life when I was living in Sri Lanka, was going on alms round, particularly when going to houses when people are not expecting me to turn up, going to like a new village, a new hamlet, and then you just stand there silently. And it's different, you see, in Thailand or Myanmar, the alms round is a regular observance, a regular practice. So people are expecting the monastics to go by every day. And so they already have tables set up outside their houses with a pot of rice and then another bowl with different packets of different kinds of curries and vegetables and so on, fruits to put into the bowl. But in Sri Lanka, the alms round is not so common, but people have it sort of imprinted on their consciousness from the stories that they've heard, sermons that they've heard about the practice of alms round. And so sometimes when I would be sort of traveling through Sri Lanka, I would just staying at a temple. So I would take my bowl and go to a nearby village or hamlet and just stand there. And then people are not expecting a monk to go by an alms round, but suddenly you're standing there. And then because the houses, they keep the windows open, the doors open. And usually it's the children who come out to play, and then they'll see a monk standing there with the alms bowl, and then they'll go running into the house and say, Amma, Amma, Handaru Wadinawa, Handaru Adinawa. Mommy, Mommy, a monk has come, a monk has come. And then suddenly they'll get something prepared and come out very happily and make the offering. And so it gives a very, like a boost of joy between the householders offering the food and the monastic who is receiving the food. And the monastic is happy not because they're getting the food, but because of this sort of consolidating this bond of spiritual solidarity, which is sort of governed by faith. And here, okay, first we'll get Sia's answer. So Sia says, why would the arhats first show compassion to the person who is without faith, miserly, mean, and abusive? They would first show compassion to the one who has faith, who's a munificent giver, one who delights in charity. But this statement, I think, has to be understood with a certain qualification that also the ideal way of going an alms round is not that you choose those people who are generous and you go to their houses and you skip the houses of the people who don't give. But the ideal way is called sapadana pindapata, which means that you go to every house, not skipping houses. So sometimes you go to a house, you know that the people never give, but you stand there waiting a minute, maybe sending out blessings. Sukhi hotu, sukhi hotu, sukhi hotu. You just stand there. May you be well, may you be happy, may you be safe, may you be healthy. And then if nobody comes out, nobody gives, then you just silently move on to the next house. And sometimes you can do this over a long period of time. The people never give, but then suddenly, unexpectedly, the mind might change and they might come out and then give something. Yeah, there's a little story to illustrate this, which comes in the beginning, the very beginning, the background story. There's a classical work in Pali called Milinda Panha, The Questions of King Milinda. And the work, it's a fictional work, which revolves around a dialogue between a Buddhist monk named Nagasena and a Greek king named Melinda, which would be the king in Greek. It would be Menanda, Meninda. So the way the work begins, okay, the king Melinda is a very, very philosophically astute king, and he uses his knowledge of different philosophical systems to argue with all the different schools of philosophy prevalent in India at that time. This would be in the area called Gandhara. Now it corresponds to Pakistan, Eastern Afghanistan. And so King Melinda is refuting all of the different philosophical systems. And the Buddhists are worried, and they don't have, strangely, they don't have anybody who could contend with Melinda in debate. And so the Devas ask one of the young Devas to descend into the human world in order to get reborn as a human being and then to become somehow to get ordained as a monk, to become learned in the Buddhist philosophical systems, and then to be able to debate with King Milinda and convert the king to Buddhism. Okay, so now the Buddhists have to arrange to make contact with the family into which this Deva is reborn. And the Deva is reborn into a Brahmin family. And so they send one of the senior monks to go on alms round to the family, to the house in which that Deva, who's going to become Nagasena, has been reborn. And so for 7 years, the monk goes on alms round, passing that house, and every day, each day, nobody comes out to offer that monk anything. And so this goes on for more than 7 years. And then one day, as the monk is standing there, the wife The Brahmin's wife comes out and says to the monk, please move on, Venerable Sir. Go to the next house. Here we don't give. And then the monk says to the woman, he says, thank you very much. And then she reports that to her husband, and her husband is astonished. The Brahmin is astonished. The monk said, thank you very much, though he didn't give anything. And so the Brahmin comes to the monk and says, why did you say thank you very much? We didn't give anything. And then the monk says, for 7 years, I've been walking by this house and every day, and nobody came out even to speak to me. But finally today, your wife came out and said, move on, Venerable Sir, we don't give anything here. And so because she spoke to me, I said, thank you, at least for speaking to me. And then the Brahmin was struck with wonder and amazement and thought, wow, these monks are very, very appreciative and grateful, very kind and thoughtful, that they express thanks just for a kind word, not even for receiving anything. And so then he said, well then, Venerable, please, tomorrow you come to our house for your meal offering. And so then the monk came to the house the next day, and then in this way he was able to attract that little boy. The little boy became impressed by the bearing of the monk, and then that little boy wanted to learn the philosophy of the monk. And so eventually that little boy got ordained as a novice, then became a fully ordained monk, and then became the great master Nagasena. Anyway, that's a little bit of a detour. Okay, but anyway, it's just to show that when going on the alms round, even though one might give sort of preference to those who have faith, who delight in charity, but ideally one should go to every house, even to the people who are miserly, mean, and abusive, because in time their minds might change. Okay, then continuing now. Okay, so then the Buddha asks, from whom would the arhats first receive alms? From the one without faith or from the one endowed with faith? And of course, the arhats would receive alms first from the person with faith, because the one without faith, who's miserly and mean, wouldn't be disposed to offer alms. Okay, then the next question, to whom would the arhats, and again I say the virtuous monastics, first teach the Dhamma? To the one without faith or to the one with faith who's generous and delights in charity? And the answer is that the arhats will first teach the Dhamma to the person who has faith, who's generous and delights in charity. Of course, again, one should teach the Dhamma to everybody, but if a person is without any faith, without any interest in the Dhamma, then they're not going to open their minds to listen to the Dhamma. So of course, you're not going to teach them. But sometimes if there's like a general public talk on the Dhamma, sometimes people will come to listen to the talk with the intention of debating with the speaker or finding faults with them, criticizing them. So you still give the talk for the purpose of uplifting, delighting, and benefiting the people who have faith, who are inclined to accept the Dhamma, and you do so with the hope that those who are critical of the Dhamma, somehow their minds will be changed and transformed, and they'll become open-minded and receptive to the Dhamma. Okay, then the fifth benefit, okay, which, and here is a little bit pointing to a little bit of sort of based on a personal sort of maybe grasping. So which person would acquire a good reputation? The one without faith who is miserly, mean, and abusive, or the person with faith who is generous and delights in charity? And so Siha answers that the one who acquires the good reputation is the person possessed of faith who's generous and delights in charity. And I think we see this, that this carries through even into our contemporary world where people who are who are generous, who are known as philanthropists, then get a good reputation. And so often people put up plaques showing who are the donors who have made offerings to the construction of this building or who have given to support this charity. And so in that way, you get a good reputation. Okay, number six, which person would approach an assembly confidently and composed? The one without faith who is miserly, mean, and abusive, or the one with faith who's generous and delights in charity? And then the answer is that it's the person who possesses faith, who is generous and delights in charity, that would approach the assemblies to speak in the assembly confidently and composed. Yeah, I'm trying to understand this myself. So it seems that when you practice charity or generosity, you develop a strong sense of self-esteem. And when you have that sense of self-esteem, then when you have to speak in front of an assembly, you can go into the assembly feeling sort of proud of oneself, not in a in a sense that you're arrogant and haughty, but you feel a sense of inner security, inner poise, composure, self-confidence, because you know that you are helping others, benefiting others, that you have this faith in spiritual, let's say in faith and spiritual values. And so when you go to an assembly and you're called upon to speak, you don't have to be timid, shy, humiliated, fearful, nervous, anxious, but you can speak boldly, even without preparing in advance. Sometimes you just completely just surrender to your own sort of inner voice, and you let that inner voice take over, and then you can address the assembly. And because you have that poise and confidence, the words will naturally flow into the mind and you can speak eloquently in the assembly. Of course, if you have to give a detailed talk, it's good to prepare in advance, but you don't have to feel embarrassed, humiliated, or ashamed in front of the assembly, but you can just let yourself go. And through that poise and confidence, the words will come naturally to you. Okay, so that is the sixth benefit that comes to the person who is generous, endowed with faith. Okay, now the Buddha asks, now we come to point 7. What do you think, Siha, with the breakup of the body, which, excuse me, which person would be reborn in a good destination in a heavenly world? The one without faith, again, who is miserly, mean, and abusive, or the one with faith who is generous and delights in charity? Okay, now this is where an interesting passage here. Okay, so the Buddha, Siha says, how could the person without faith and so on be reborn in a good destination in the heavenly world. It's the person endowed with faith who is generous and delights in charity who would be reborn in the good destination in a heavenly world. Okay, but now this is the interesting passage where Siha is speaking. He says, remember that Siha had asked about the directly visible benefits of giving. And so now Siha says, I do not go by faith in the Buddha about the 6 directly visible fruits of giving that have been declared by him. He says, I know them for myself because I am generous, I give alms, and so the arhats or the virtuous monastics show compassion to me, they approach me, and by giving to them, I acquire a good reputation. And because I'm generous, whatever assembly I approach it confidently and composed. And so I do not have to rely on faith in the Blessed One about those 6 benefits of giving, because I directly experience them for myself. But now Siha is very upfront and straightforward. He says, as for that 7th benefit of giving, that I don't know for myself. But when you tell me, when the Blessed One tells me that the donor, the giver, is reborn in a good destination, he says, I do not know this, and with respect to this, I go by faith in the Blessed One. And then the Buddha confirms this with the breakup of the body after death. It's the generous person who is reborn in a good destination in the heavenly world. And notice that the sutta just stops with rebirth in a good destination. It doesn't go on to speak about attaining liberation or any of the fruits of of realization, because generosity by itself is it's a basis for punya, for merit. It's a parami, a spiritual perfection, but on its own, it doesn't bring realization or a breakthrough to the attainment. For that, you have to join it with samatha and vipassana, with calm and insight. But still, just by the practice of giving, one acquires the merit that can lead to a favorable rebirth. Okay, let's see if there's any questions that come out. And I just want to emphasize what I find, very, very, very interesting in this sutta. And even though the speaker of this is Siha rather than the Buddha himself, but it seems to show the kind of balanced way of thinking which is characteristic of early Buddhism, that you could distinguish between what one can experience and know for oneself and what one doesn't know for oneself, but one accepts on trust from the Buddha. And so one uses the benefits that one can experience for oneself as the basis for placing trust in the Buddha about the things that one doesn't know for oneself. To give a broader perspective on this, let's say, okay, when I observe the precepts, let's say I take 5 precepts: no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no false speech, no use of intoxicants. On the basis of those precepts, of observing those precepts, I experience a kind of freedom of mind, an inner happiness, a contentment, a joy knowing that I don't do anything that harms others. And I feel some kind of security in my mind, a sense of safety, knowing that I'm not harming others. That I experience directly for myself. I don't have any direct knowledge that observing the precepts creates the merit that's going to bring a favorable rebirth. I don't have any knowledge about the workings of karma or a direct experience about the workings of karma, about other realms of existence. But still, I feel what's called the bliss of blamelessness, the happiness that comes from knowing that I live a beautiful and blameless life. Okay, when I practice meditation, let's say I do the metta bhavana, the meditation of loving kindness, or the other Brahma Viharas, then I feel a kind of happiness knowing that I'm generating the feeling of goodwill to people, to living beings everywhere, that I'm generating compassion to all beings, altruistic joy with those who are happy. So here I can experience that happiness that comes from developing these beautiful qualities of mind. And when I develop, say, mindfulness of breathing or observation of the mind, then I can experience the benefits that come from developing stronger mindfulness, clear comprehension, greater concentration, and so on, purifying my mind of the unwholesome thoughts. That's something that I can directly experience for myself. Okay, now as I said, I don't have any direct perception of other realms of existence, knowing the laws of karma, but based on the benefits that I experience through these practices, the benefits that I experience for myself, then I have the trust and confidence that when the Buddha speaks about other realms of existence, when he speaks about the capacity of actions to produce results in the future, in future lives, then I realize that the person who is taught these beautiful and wholesome practices can't be a speaker of falsehood, but must be speaking on the basis of his own personal experience, his own direct knowledge. And so then I place trust in the Buddha that there are these multiple realms of existence, that there is a law, an ethical law, connecting my actions to rebirth into the different realms of existence. And then when the Buddha speaks about a state that transcends all the different realms of existence and about a path that leads to that state, the state of nirvana, then I place trust in the Buddha as the one who can show the way to nirvana. Okay, so let's see if we have any questions. Now I have to find the participant list.
Bhante, ask the people in the room first.
Good reminder. Anybody in the room? We have full house today. Okay, now I see the participant list. Okay. Okay, so first I see Chaya.
Avasarai Bhante, I have a question about the sixth benefit, feeling confident and composed going into assemblies. Um, uh, to me, it occurred that that and identity view can be quite close together. Could you please elaborate on that, Bhante?
You say that
Thank
this
you very much.
and identity view can be close?
Bhante, feeling confident and composed about one's giving and in going into assemblies, wouldn't that kind of um, sort of aid to growth of identity view or Sakkaya Ditthi.
Yeah, you could, from one point of view, you could say that it almost seems as though it's like encouraging a sense of self or a sense of I, but this is not having, conceit or arrogance or pride or haughtiness, but rather it's a sense of self-confidence when going into the assembly. So it's not um, you know, endorsing the idea that there's some kind of substantial self, but it's this, as I said, it's this self-confidence. In fact, the word used here is visarado. And this is one of the qualities of the Buddha. Actually, there are four qualities, the four Vesaraja, the four kinds of self-confidence. So the Buddha says that he has this confidence that when he goes, speaks in the assemblies, that there's nobody that could criticize him. Yeah, so it's just a kind of, as I said, a sense of self-confidence that one feels this inner poise, um, inner security, stability, when one has to face an assembly to speak.
Thank you very much, Bhante. That point is very clear to me now.
Okay.
Much merit to you.
Okay, then Vicharo. Oh, I thought I saw the hand. Now I don't see it. Okay, Vandana.
Thank you, Bhante, for your teaching. I just wanted to comment on the alms round tradition, which was there in Indian society, but there was not Brahmins, but the other ascetics, when they attain some good spiritual attainments, they would just stay in the forest and they would go. They won't ask for it, but people will give them if they wanted to. But the thing was, some of them were very arrogant about it. For example, I don't know if you know about Ramayana, when Ravan, he went from Sri Lanka to kidnap Sita, Rama's wife, and then he was very arrogant, and then he asked for bhikshan. Bhiksha is a alms. So, but for Buddha, it was very radical that he started this tradition. He adapted this tradition in a very different way, that you can't ask for it and you have to be very humble about it. And especially when the royal prince were becoming Buddhist and they had some arrogance and ego, so Buddha also wanted them to put the ego down and ask for support from the lay people. So that's the difference between Hindu ascetics and the Buddhist ascetics. So I just wanted to mention that. But in Bodh Gaya, I noticed something different, that Indian monastics were kind of expecting some money or something. Some of them even accepting money. In Savatthi, I noticed that they were even taking the Indian rupees and from people. And one of them I approached and I asked them that Buddha never taught that people, monks should be asking for money. And then he got really angry with me.
Yeah, I don't know the tradition. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Thank
And
you,
I
Bhante.
remember let's see, what year was this? 2019, when I was in India. Yeah, I went on yeah. I was walking through, this is a part of Karnataka state, and then I went on alms round, and I came to a house, and there was a woman sort of on the veranda, the porch, and then she didn't know what I wanted, but I had a lay person with me from the Mahabodhi Society, and he explained to her that I'm going on alms round. And then I said that I only accept food, I don't accept money. And then she was very, very happy, and she invited me to come to sit on her veranda, and then she offered me the food for the meal. And then she told me that she was very, very pleased that I just accepted food. And she said that when some of the Hindu ascetics come, she might give them like 100 rupees, and then they'll scold her and say, "We want 500, not 100." Okay, so I think next is Madeline in the UK.
Yeah, thank you, Bhante. I wonder, do we get some of these blessings if we give generously to others than monastics? Like, for example, if we give to, well, your charity, feeding the people in Africa, the
Oh yeah, yeah,
Buddhist,
yeah,
and for homeless people near us, and those
yeah.
sorts of charities close
Yeah,
to.
I would say, yeah, generosity is always meritorious. Yeah.
And do we have to kind of question whether the person who's receiving this generosity is worthy of it, or do we just give with dhamma in our hearts, just give without any kind of question about should they receive it or not?
If one is giving as an act of charity, to the poor, needy, um, people facing disasters, extreme poverty, then one doesn't consider the moral quality of the person who's going to be the recipient of the act of generosity.
Okay.
But if one is giving sort of in the religious context, then in the sense of giving out of reverence, then one has to consider whether the recipients are truly worthy of the offerings.
I understand. Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, then Gita.
Yes, Bhante, as always, thank you so much for all your teachings. We're so lucky to have you. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you. Bhante, my experience in India in my trip was quite different because I took the basic four requisites for the Sangha from Sri Lanka. I actually prepared bags. And when I went to all the
You prepared what?
bags of requisites to give to the Mahasangha, there was no
Bags of
money. Yeah, instead of giving money,
Yeah,
that's what I did. Like I had medicinal requisites,
yeah,
whatever they need for their subsistence, that's what I gave. And they were so happy. And it was really great. And I
yeah,
agree that there are people who are looking for money and probably not bhikshus.
yeah,
But I was fortunate in the fact that I was able to find bhikshus who were very sincere
yeah,
and Dhamma practitioners. So I was able to. I was so happy there. It was such a great experience, Bhante.
yeah,
Giving the dana, even food, giving food. We
yeah.
even gave to the people who were like little boys who were hungry and didn't
Mm.
have. And they come and ask me, do you have Siddha Lepa? Because they know we're Sri Lankan. Siddha Lepa is a little bottle that we use when you have headaches or body pains. We just rub it. It's an ointment.
What is it
And
called?
it's called Siddha Lepa.
Oh, Siddha Lepa. I know Siddha Lepa.
Yeah, Sri Lankans would know, right? Yeah, I took tons of that and
Yeah,
just gave it away to whoever came and asked. I
yeah,
just gave it, and we bought food and gave it, even fed the animals. So it
yeah,
was such a good experience.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I wanted to share that. Thank you, Bhante.
Okay. Okay, I want to move on. I wanted to cover another sutta today. Yeah, this is an important sutta where the Buddha explains his own qualities. So this is now we come to sutta number 58, and it's called No Need to Hide. So here he says that there are these four things that the Tathagata, the Buddha, doesn't have to hide, and then three ways in which he is irreproachable. So the four things that he doesn't have to hide. So one is the bodily behavior is purified, verbal behavior is purified, his mental behavior is purified, and his livelihood is purified. And so we say that there's no bodily misconduct on his part that he has to hide, no verbal misconduct that he has to hide, no mental misconduct that he has to hide, and no wrong livelihood that he has to hide. And I think this statement is extremely important, especially when we consider some of this, like the scandals that have broken out even today, in recent years, over many spiritual teachers, including, I have to say, rather sadly, Buddhist spiritual teachers, that you learn that there's somebody who's revered so highly as being the embodiment of great wisdom, great compassion, a holy man, a reincarnation of a divine spirit, and so on, an avatar. And then after a few years, I have to say, some of the women who get the courage spill the beans on him. And it turns out that he's been conducting secretly, sending love letters to them and um, exposing himself to them or engaging in sexual misconduct with them. And then the secrets spill out into the open, and then their reputation gets destroyed. So they have to, in fact, they have like often these very prominent teachers, they have their teams of supporters who know about their transgressions, but for some reason feel the need to protect them, to defend them. So they hide the secrets. And so the supporters, their defenders, know about their transgressions, but the general public doesn't. But at some point, the people who have been abused by them will reveal the secrets, and then their reputation collapses. I'm trying to think I remember there was in India, Satya Sai Baba, who was able to perform these so-called mystical supernormal tricks or supernormal feats, manifesting objects out of the thin air. But then it was exposed that he was, in this case, it was not women, but it was young boys that he was bringing to his room and abusing them. I don't want to mention other spiritual teachers, but this happens. But the Buddha is one who doesn't have to hide any kind of bodily misconduct, doesn't have to hide any kind of abusive, coarse speech that he might have engaged in. And with the mental conduct, of course, it doesn't appear visibly, but he can be assured that he doesn't have any unwholesome thoughts or states of mind that those who have the power of thought reading might be able to pick up on. And he doesn't engage in any kind of wrong livelihood. So those are 4 things that he doesn't have to hide. And then there are 3 respects in which he is irreproachable. And so he says, first of all, that his Dhamma is well expounded. So in regard to this, he says, I don't see any ground on the basis of which anyone in this world might reproach me and say that your Dhamma is not well expounded. Yeah, this seems to go back to the point one of the people asked the question, like, does this imply a sense of self? So it's, of course, the Buddha doesn't have any Atmavada, any doctrine of self or any Sakaya Ditti view of self. But because he's fully enlightened, he can make this declaration that his Dhamma is well expounded. It's not through pride or arrogance, but he knows that the Dhamma is well expounded. And nobody, he says, nobody can criticize me and say, for such and such a reason, your Dhamma is not well expounded. Yeah, so he says, that's the ground by which he dwells secure, fearless, and self-confident. That's the important point, that through your sense of inner security, you can dwell fearless and self-confident. So that's the first ground, that the Dhamma is well expounded. The second way in which he is irreproachable, he says, I have well proclaimed to my disciples the practice or path leading to Nibbana in such a way that if we practice in accordance with this teaching, then you can reach the destruction of the asavas and realize the highest goal. And so he says, I don't see any ground on which anybody in this world might reproach me and say that you have not proclaimed to your disciples the practice leading to Nibbana, such that those who undertake that practice can reach the goal in this life itself. And then the third respect in which he's irreproachable, he says that my assembly includes many hundreds of disciples who have realized for themselves the destruction of the asavas and who have gained that taintless liberation of mind, liberation by wisdom. And so I don't see any ground on the basis of which anyone in the world could reproach me and say, for such and such a reason, it's not the case that your assembly includes many hundreds of disciples who have reached the destruction of the taints. And so those are the three things about which the Tathagata is irreproachable. Okay, so that was a rather quick treatment of that topic, but if there's any questions come up, please. Let me get the participant list. Where is it? Okay, there it is. Okay, Doran.
Thank you, Bhante. I'm curious about in the US Theravada monasteries. I was inspired by what Gita said, that requisites are a good thing to bring. What would be, if you're going to meet a monk, an individual monk, or the Sangha of monks at a monastery, I'm trying to figure out some good things that would be acceptable to bring. And maybe I can give you a list of a couple of things that I thought of that maybe you can reject or tell me if they're bad or good. Like, what about N95 masks in monk collars, or maybe a hand sanitizer, or maybe a reusable water bottle or thermos, or some towels? How about in terms of food, trail mix or dried fruit, or a sewing kit?
Sewing kit.
Sewing kit. Umbrella, rain poncho.
Yeah, all of those things seem to be useful. But it's probably best, like if you have a monastery that you're connected with, to ask the monks whether there are any particular things that they need. Because sometimes we could get excess quantities of certain items.
This would be for a traveling monk who is not even from there. And basically, I guess you have to be mindful of not overloading what they carry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so any further questions? So I don't see any hands raised. Any question here? Okay, then I think I see Madeline. Did you just raise a hand?
Yes, Bhante, I just wanted to say, in respect to having the confidence in yourself that you were talking about, and somebody being concerned about it being a self-view, I think it rests a little bit on that teaching. We're always told to rest on our sila. If we know we're keeping the precepts and can confidently say that we haven't broken any of our precepts, we can rest confidently in our sila and feel that we're irreproachable ourselves in a kind of minor way.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. In fact, there's another sutta. It's included in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta. It's a passage in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta. And it also comes, I think we had it earlier. It comes also in the Anguttara Nikaya, maybe Book of Fives, and also in the Udana, where the Buddha speaks about the benefits of observing the five precepts. And then one of the benefits is that when one approaches any assembly, one can approach that assembly, in confidence, without feeling any kind of fear, nervousness, or anxiety. But I have to say also that there are people who are very eloquent speakers, very confident in assemblies, very bold in speaking in front of large audiences, but they can be very, very corrupt in their behavior. So don't think that just because a person is an eloquent speaker, that it means that they are flawless in their observance of ethical conduct. Chaya, did you have something to say or ask?
Yes, Bhante, it's not related to the point discussed just now, but in case I don't get a chance and we seem to be having less questions today, I just wanted to mention, Bhante, of how deeply grateful I am to you because of the books that you have translated. I have read all of them. I have all of them. You have completely changed my life and made the Dhamma available to me. I am Sri Lankan, but I find the Buddha Jayanti Tripitaka, the language to be really difficult. So I have greatly benefited from your English translations. Much merit to you, Bhante. Sadhu,
Okay,
sadhu.
thank
I'm
you.
forever grateful.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I heard many, many complaints about that Buddha Jayanti singular translation. It was done by maybe in the 1950s, 1960s, by that older generation of Sri Lankan monks who is very, very well grounded in Sanskrit. And so they used a very Sanskritized form of the Sinhala language to translate the text from Pali into Sinhalese. And so the only ones who could understand them are other learned Sri Lankan monks who have been trained in Sanskrit.
Bhante, I
Bhante,
didn't know that, but I thought the same, Bhante. The words are very difficult, and to be honest, sometimes I find the Pali word more understandable than the Buddha Jayanti Sinhala word. Um,
Yeah, they
that's
use the
really funny.
They even use the Sanskritized form of the Pali words. Like we have Aryo Atangiko Muggo, so they'll translate it as, I think, Arya Ashtangika Margya.
Bhante, I have a question, not related to today's class, but I just wanted to know because this is a very busy month with Katina in Toronto at all the different temples.
Yeah.
You're offering a retreat, Bhante, with another venerable. Will this retreat be available online? It's for the whole weekend, right? Like a Saturday, Sunday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be online.
In person only?
I think so.
Okay, Bhante. Yeah, I just wanted to verify
Yeah,
that.
I'm just
Thank
giving
you.
some talks in that retreat.
Oh, I
So,
see. Okay.
yeah, it's not that I'm conducting the retreat, but it's the
Okay.
other monk who's now the abbot, the new abbot for the monastery. He's
Oh, I see.
organized the retreat. So it's a metta retreat. It's just like a 2-day retreat.
Okay, Bhante.
And
Yeah.
so there'll be I will give some talks based on the Metta Sutta, and then conduct, I think, in the evening, a metta meditation, similar to
Okay, Bhante.
my Wednesday evening meditation.
Okay, Bhante, that's great. Yeah, because every weekend I'm pretty much at a
Yeah,
temple, Viharia here because of
yeah,
Katina.
yeah. I
Thanks,
know it's
Bhante.
a busy, busy month. Yeah.
Very busy. Yeah. Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, so I think we're going to have to end for the day. So we'll end with the sharing of the merits with the Dharma protecting devas. Akasa tacha bhumata devanaga mahidika punyanta manumoditva chirang rakantu sasanam. Akasa tacha bhumata devanaga mahidika punyanta manumoditva chirang rakantu desanam. Akasa tacha bhumata devanaga mahidika punyanta manumoditva Chirang rakantu mang parang dukha patachani dukha baya patachani baya soka patachani soka hantu sabe pipanino. May those in suffering be free from suffering. May those in fear be free from fear. May those in sorrow be free from sorrow. May all living beings also be thus. And then we'll end with 3 bows to the Buddha. Okay, so I'm going to stand up. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, so thank you everybody for joining.
Thank you,
And
Bhante.
And about to Bhante. Thank you, Bhante Bodhi. Bow.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante. Many merits, Bhante.
Okay.
Thank you,
Sending many
Bhante.
Wonderful
blessings.
to see you, Bhante. Thiruvan No Buddhaya.
Thank you,
Have a good
Bhante.
lunch, Bhante.
okay, thank you.
Have a great week.
Bye, Bhante.
Thiruvan
Bye, Bhante.
Bye, Bhante.